first feature we'll look at is failed request tracing, or the code name of FREB, and we're going to see how to create some display handlers for this feature. So the idea with failed request tracing is you're able to set up a log that gets detailed tracing information for a request under particular conditions. So you go into IIS Manager and you can configure what type of content you're interested in, what particular HTTP status code you'd like failed request tracing to keep. That would be typically a 500, for instance. You can also set the time taken exceeded. So if a page takes longer than a certain number of seconds, it will also save off that failed request. It stores an XML file for each failed request, and then they provide a style sheet that gives you a nice presentation of the data in that file. We're going to create some handlers that let you view these files remotely. So by default, the failed request tracing feature is built into IIS 7. I'm going to show you how you can configure it. The problem is these files exist only on the physical web servers. So I wanted a way to be able to remotely access a particular server, have it show me all of the failed request files that are stored on the disk, and then be able to use the style sheet and translate that into a nice looking HTML so I can see how many problems I'm having when I'm remote to my server. So first let's look how this feature works. So I'll go to the top of my web server and turn on failed request tracing. I can also do that at a lower level if I would like, but I need to go here first, and I'm going to open that. I've already gone through the wizard, but we'll see what it looks like. So the first thing it asks for is what kind of content would you like to trace. So I just said if anything goes wrong, whether it's ASP.NET or ASP, it doesn't matter. I want to get a trace of that. In my case, I was interested in 500 status code, which is the typical, a page died. I want to do a time taken if it's greater than 30 seconds. I specify all of the various providers. So now I've got it configured and turned on. Now I'm going to go back and make a request that I know will fail. So I'm going to go back to my cause 500 page, which is going to do a division by 0. So now I've had this error occur. When I'm remote, I want to be able to view that and see have I had any issues. So I've created a frebviewer.axd handler that takes a query string with my IIS site. So in my case, this site happens to be number 10. I'll show you where you can see that. So back in IIS, if I look at my sites, it has an ID number, and my IIS 7 site happens to have the ID of 10. So when I do that, I see that there's a single failed request file at this time. I can click that. It's now going to do another handler, the frebdisplay.axd, which takes that XML as a parameter, applies the XSLT style sheet, and then I've got a nice view here of what went wrong. So I can look at the request details, and you can see this has a lot of information. So I can go through all these details about how much time was spent in each particular module. If I want, I can also look at the more compact view that shows me time takens and all the different things that were happening. And again, on the request summary, I can see right away that I had a divide by 0 here. So it's just a handy way, and again, this allows me to remotely see exactly what happened. I can see the status code was a 500. I can see how long it took to execute, what time the request was made. So let's look at how we create this handlers. So first of all, I go in my web config. I wanted to have a frebviewer.axd. That was the first request I made. The purpose of that handler is to go out and show me all of the files that have been stored on the server. So let's look at the freb handler. So this looks like any other HTTP handler. I've got my process request. What it needs to do is it's going to take the site value from the query string. It's going to then use path information. So by default, CINetPub logs failed request log files is the folder where these are stored. And there's a different folder for each site. So it's W3SVC and then the site ID. That's where these XML files are going to be stored. And you can see I got the XSL style sheet and placed it in that folder as well. So again, the purpose of this handler, it's going to go out, it's going to look at that folder, it's going to create a list of hyperlinks for me that point to each of the failed files. So it just puts out a header, then it uses the directory info class, looks for any XML files that are in that folder, and then calls response write and simply does a format on this string, and you'll see it's got some placeholders here. So it fills in the site and the file name information and then displays the name of that file. So again, this is the very first page that we viewed. So if I go back, we'll see that this is the frebviewer.axt. So it showed that I just had that one file. When I click on this, it's going to go to my second handler, the freb display. If we look at that one, frebdisplay.axt is the freb file display handler. So if we open that up, again, this is just another handler. What this one's going to do is it's going to take the particular XML file and it's going to do a transformation using the style sheet. So it takes the file name, it adds it on to the existing path, it adds the XSL, and does the compiled transform. It does a load here, which does that transformation or sets it up. I do the transform here. This is what applies that XSL style sheet against my XML file and produces the result. And then lastly, I do a response.write that outputs the results of that transformation, which again ends up being this display. So this was just HTML created by applying that XSLT style sheet against my XML file. So again, failed request tracing, it's a very nice feature. Unfortunately, its only method of storing the information today is XML files on the physical server. The ability to create handlers gives me the opportunity to remotely access my physical server, see all of the failed requests that have occurred, and view the details of each one from anywhere on the internet.